Within the ancient stone walls of the Tower of London, two young boys vanished into history, leaving behind one of England's most enduring mysteries. The summer of 1483 marked a pivotal moment in English history, when 12-year-old Edward V and his 9-year-old brother Richard, Duke of York, entered the Tower of London as rightful heirs to the throne. They would never emerge as kings, and their fate would spark centuries of investigation, speculation, and debate that continues to this day. To understand this mystery, we must first examine the turbulent political landscape of late medieval England. Edward IV had ruled England for over 2 decades when he died unexpectedly in April 1483, leaving behind 2 young sons and a kingdom on the brink of uncertainty. The elder boy, Edward, was immediately proclaimed king, but at 12 years old, he required a regent to govern in his name. Enter Richard, Duke of Gloucester, Edward IV's younger brother, and the boy's uncle. Parliament appointed him as Lord Protector, a position that granted him considerable power over the realm, and crucially, over the young princes themselves. Richard's first act was to escort his nephews to the Tower of London, ostensibly for their protection and to prepare for Edward V's coronation. The Tower, contrary to its later reputation as a place of imprisonment and execution, served as a royal residence and was traditionally where monarchs stayed before their coronations. The arrangement seemed perfectly natural, even expected. Yet what happened next would forever alter the course of English history. In June 1483, just 2 months after Edward IV's death, Richard made a startling announcement. He declared that his brother's marriage to Elizabeth Woodville had been invalid, rendering both princes illegitimate and unable to inherit the throne. The evidence for this claim centered on allegations that Edward IV had been pre-contracted to marry another woman before his union with Elizabeth, making his subsequent marriage bigamous under medieval law. Parliament, faced with this revelation, officially declared the princes bastards through an act known as Titulus Regius. With the line of succession now cleared, Richard ascended to the throne as Richard III in July 1483. The coronation that should have belonged to young Edward V instead became his uncle's moment of triumph. But where were the princes during these momentous events? Eyewitness accounts from the summer of 1483 paint a gradually darkening picture. Initially, the boys were seen playing in the tower's gardens and appearing at windows, waving to crowds gathered outside. However, as the weeks progressed, these sightings became increasingly rare. Dr. John Argentine, the prince's physician, reported that young Edward had grown melancholy and spent his days in confession, as if preparing for death. Argentine was reportedly the last person known to have spoken with the princes before they disappeared entirely from public view. By autumn 1483, no reliable witness could claim to have seen either boy alive. The mystery deepens when we examine the various theories that emerge to explain their disappearance. The most widely accepted narrative, popularized by Tudor historians and later immortalized by Shakespeare, portrays Richard III as a ruthless usurper who murdered his nephews to secure his throne. This version suggests that Richard ordered the boys' deaths sometime in late summer 1483, eliminating any potential challenge to his rule. However, modern historians have raised compelling questions about this interpretation. Richard faced numerous rebellions and threats throughout his brief 2-year reign, yet none of his enemies ever produced the princes or claimed they were alive. If the boys had survived, surely Henry Tudor, who would defeat Richard at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485, would have used them to legitimize his own claim to the throne. Alternative theories present equally intriguing possibilities. Some historians suggest that Henry VII himself may have ordered the princes' deaths after becoming king, viewing them as potential focal points for Yorkist resistance. Others propose that the boys were secretly moved from the tower and lived out their lives in obscurity, possibly abroad. The physical evidence adds another layer to this enigma. In 1674, workmen renovating a staircase in the Tower of London discovered a wooden box containing the skeletons of 2 children. King Charles II, convinced these were the remains of the lost princes, ordered them interred in Westminster Abbey with full royal honours. However, the bones were never subjected to thorough scientific analysis, and their identity remains unconfirmed. Modern forensic techniques could potentially solve this centuries-old puzzle, but attempts to examine the remains have been repeatedly denied. The Church of England and the royal family have consistently refused requests for DNA testing, citing concerns about disturbing what they consider a sacred burial. This decision ensures that the physical evidence remains tantalizing, but ultimately inconclusive. Contemporary DNA analysis has revolutionized our understanding of medieval history in other cases. The identification of Richard III's remains in 2012, discovered beneath a Leicester car park, demonstrated the power of modern science to illuminate the past. Yet the most crucial evidence in the princes in the Tower case remains frustratingly beyond reach. The cultural impact of this mystery extends far beyond academic circles. The story has inspired countless novels, plays, and films, each offering their own interpretation of events. The princes have become symbols of innocence, destroyed by political ambition, their youth and vulnerability making their fate all the more poignant. What makes this mystery particularly compelling is its proximity to the birth of the modern English state. The Tudor dynasty, which emerged from the chaos following Richard III's defeat, would go on to produce some of England's most famous monarchs, including Henry VIII and Elizabeth I. The princes' disappearance directly enabled this transformation, making their fate not just a personal tragedy, but a pivotal moment in national history. As we stand today in the shadows of the tower's ancient walls, the stones themselves seem to guard their secrets jealously, leaving us to wonder whether the truth about two young boys who walked into history and never walked out again will ever truly be known. Deep within the climate-controlled vaults of Yale University's Beinecke Library lies a book that has confounded scholars, cryptographers, and linguists for over a century. A manuscript written in a language that may not belong to any known civilization on Earth. The story begins in 1912, when antiquarian book dealer Wilfrid Voynich discovered this extraordinary codex among a collection of manuscripts at the Villa Mondragone near Rome. What he found defied everything he knew about medieval texts. The manuscript contained 240 pages of vellum, covered in an elegant, flowing script that resembled no known alphabet or writing system. Accompanying this mysterious text were hundreds of detailed illustrations, impossible plants with alien-looking flowers, astronomical diagrams featuring unfamiliar star patterns, and strange biological drawings of nude female figures bathing in interconnected pools of green liquid. The physical manuscript itself tells us tantalizing fragments of its story. Carbon dating has placed its creation between 1404 and 1438, during the height of the Renaissance. The vellum is genuine medieval calfskin, and the inks show the chemical composition typical of 15th century Europe. Every scientific test confirms its authenticity as a medieval document, yet its contents remain utterly foreign to our understanding of medieval knowledge and expression. The manuscript is organized into distinct sections, each more puzzling than the last. The botanical section displays over 100 plant illustrations, but botanists have identified none of these species as real plants that exist or have ever existed on Earth. Some drawings show roots, stems, and flowers in impossible biological configurations plants that seem to follow their own rules of anatomy and growth. The astronomical section presents circular diagrams filled with star charts, zodiacal symbols, and mysterious radial patterns. While some elements resemble medieval astrology, the overall system appears to follow an unknown cosmological framework. One particularly intriguing diagram shows what appears to be a detailed map of an unknown galaxy or constellation pattern, complete with interconnected pathways that suggest some form of celestial navigation system. Perhaps most enigmatic is the biological section, featuring dozens of small female figures immersed in elaborate networks of tubes and pools. The liquid in these containers is consistently depicted in green, and the figures appear to be participating in some unknown process or ritual. Medieval scholars have found no parallel for these images in any other manuscript from the period. The text itself presents the greatest challenge. The Voynich script consists of approximately 170,000 characters, forming roughly 35,000 words across 240 pages. Statistical analysis reveals patterns that suggest it functions as a genuine language rather than random gibberish. The character frequency follows Zipf's law, a mathematical principle that governs natural languages. Word length distribution and repetition patterns also match those found in real languages, indicating an underlying grammatical structure. Yet every attempt to decode this language has failed spectacularly. Professional cryptographers who broke enemy codes during both World Wars examined the manuscript and admitted defeat. The National Security Agency, with access to the world's most sophisticated code-breaking technology, has been unable to penetrate its secrets. Computer algorithms that can translate ancient Sumerian and decode complex wartime ciphers have found no entry point into the Voynich script. The manuscript's resistance to decryption has generated numerous theories about its origin and purpose. Some scholars propose it represents a constructed language, created by a medieval genius centuries before J.R.R. Tolkien invented Elvish. Others suggest it might be an elaborate steganographic device, where the real message is hidden within the seemingly meaningless text through complex encoding methods. More controversial theories venture into extraordinary territory. A few researchers have proposed that the manuscript represents knowledge from a lost civilization or even extraterrestrial origin. The unfamiliar plants, impossible biological processes, and unknown astronomical systems could indicate information from beyond Earth's natural systems. Modern computational linguistics has brought new tools to bear on the manuscript's mysteries. Artificial intelligence systems trained on hundreds of natural languages have analyzed the text's statistical properties and syntactic patterns. While these analyses confirm that the Voynich script exhibits language-like behavior, they have not revealed any connections to known language families or writing systems. Recent research has focused on the manuscript's possible connection to early alchemical traditions. Some scholars suggest the green liquid depicted throughout the biological section might represent the philosopher's stone or other alchemical substances. The plant illustrations could describe components for medieval medicines or magical preparations, encoded in a secret script to protect valuable knowledge from unauthorized eyes. The manuscript's provenance adds another layer to its mystery. Before Voynich's discovery, the codex belonged to Athanasius Kircher, a 17th-century Jesuit scholar known for his wide-ranging intellectual interests and occasional gullibility. A letter found with the manuscript suggests it might have once belonged to Roger Bacon, the 13th-century philosopher and scientist, though this connection remains unverified. Today, high-resolution digital scans have made the Voynich manuscript accessible to researchers worldwide. Yet increased scrutiny has only deepened its mysteries. Multispectral imaging has revealed hidden details in the illustrations and confirmed that the text was written continuously, not copied from another source. Every technological advance intended to solve the puzzle instead reveals new layers of complexity. As we stand at the intersection of medieval history and modern cryptography, the Voynich manuscript continues to guard its secrets with the same enigmatic silence it has maintained for 6 centuries, leaving us to wonder whether some knowledge was meant to remain forever beyond human understanding. In a cathedral in northern Italy rests a 14-foot linen cloth that bears the faint but unmistakable image of a crucified man, an image that has ignited one of the most intense scientific and theological debates of the modern era. The Shroud of Turin, housed within the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist, presents itself as an ordinary piece of ancient linen at first glance. Yet upon closer examination, this herringbone-woven fabric reveals extraordinary details. The cloth bears the front and back impressions of a human body, as if someone had been laid upon one half of the fabric and the other half folded over to cover them. The image shows a man approximately 6 feet tall with long hair, a beard, and wounds consistent with Roman crucifixion. The forensic details embedded within the cloth read like evidence from a crime scene. Puncture wounds circle the scalp, consistent with a crown of thorns. Scourge marks crisscross the back and legs, matching the pattern of a Roman flagrum or whip embedded with metal fragments. Most significantly, a wound appears in the right side of the torso, precisely where the Gospel of John describes a spear piercing Christ's side. The image itself defies simple explanation. Unlike a painting or dye, the impression appears to be formed by some form of oxidation that affected only the topmost fibers of the linen. The coloration shows no evidence of brushstrokes, and the image exhibits properties of a photographic negative A concept unknown until the invention of photography in the 19th century. When photographer Secondo Pia first captured the shroud on film in 1898, he discovered that the negative revealed a startlingly realistic positive image with remarkable three-dimensional properties. The shroud's documented history begins in the medieval period, first appearing in the historical record in the French town of Lirey around 1357. The cloth was owned by Geoffrey de Charny, a French knight whose family displayed it as the burial shroud of Jesus Christ. From France, the shroud travelled through various noble hands before arriving in Turin in 1578, where it has remained under the protection of the Catholic Church. However, gaps in the shroud's early provenance have fueled centuries of debate. No reliable documentation traces the cloth back to 1st century Palestine, leaving a significant historical void between its claimed origin and its medieval appearance. Critics point to this gap as evidence that the shroud was created during the medieval period, possibly as a religious relic designed to inspire faith and attract pilgrims. The scientific revolution brought new tools to examine the shroud's mysteries. In 1988, 3 independent laboratories at Oxford University, the University of Arizona, and the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology conducted radiocarbon dating on samples from the cloth. Their results were definitive. The linen dated to between 1260 and 1390 CE, placing its creation firmly in the medieval period and seemingly debunking claims of 1st century origin. Yet the carbon dating results only deepen the mystery rather than resolving it. The same scientific analysis that dated the cloth to medieval times confirmed other remarkable properties. The image formation mechanism remains unexplained by conventional science. Attempts to recreate the shroud using medieval techniques have produced results that pale in comparison to the original's subtle complexity and unique characteristics. Modern forensic analysis has revealed additional puzzling elements. Pollen samples taken from the cloth include species native to Palestine and Turkey, suggesting the shroud traveled through the Middle East. Blood analysis has confirmed the presence of real human blood with characteristics consistent with someone who died from trauma and asphyxiation. The blood patterns show proper clotting behavior and separate cleanly from the body image, indicating they were applied before the image formation occurred. Perhaps most intriguingly, computer analysis has revealed that the shroud image contains 3-dimensional information encoded within its intensity variations. When processed through VP8 image analyzer technology, originally developed for NASA to analyze satellite imagery, the shroud produces accurate 3-dimensional reconstructions. This property is unique among artistic works and photographs, suggesting an image formation process unlike anything in human experience. Recent research has challenged the carbon dating conclusions. Scientists have identified possible contamination sources that could have skewed the medieval dating results. The samples tested came from areas of the cloth that showed evidence of medieval repairs, where new threads were skillfully woven into the original fabric. Additionally, the shroud survived multiple fires throughout its history, including a serious blaze in 1532 that left burn marks and required extensive restoration work. New dating techniques have produced conflicting results. Vanillin analysis, which measures the breakdown of lignin in linen, suggests the shroud could be much older than the 1988 carbon dating indicated. Meanwhile, other chemical analyses point to environmental factors that could have altered the cloth's carbon content over centuries of handling, storage, and exposure to various atmospheric conditions. The image formation mechanism remains the shroud's greatest enigma. Theories range from natural chemical processes to unknown forms of radiation. Some researchers propose that a burst of energy perhaps associated with bodily decomposition, or an unknown physical phenomenon, could have created the image through a process similar to corona discharge. Others suggest that the image formed through direct contact with chemicals naturally present in human sweat and blood. As advanced imaging techniques continue to reveal new details hidden within the shroud's fibers, each discovery seems to generate more questions than answers, ensuring that this ancient cloth will continue to challenge our understanding of history, science, and the very nature of evidence itself. On Friday, October 13th, 1307, the most powerful military order in medieval Europe vanished overnight, taking with them a treasure so vast that its disappearance continues to fuel expeditions, excavations, and legends 7 centuries later. The Knights Templar began as 9 French knights who arrived in Jerusalem around 1119, pledging to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. King Baldwin II of Jerusalem granted them quarters in what they believed to be the ruins of Solomon's Temple, giving rise to their full name, the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. What started as a humble brotherhood would evolve into the medieval world's first international banking system and one of its wealthiest institutions. Within 2 decades, the Templars had transformed from a small band of warrior monks into a formidable military and financial empire. Pope Innocent II's papal bull of 1139 granted them extraordinary privileges: exemption from all taxes, the right to cross borders freely, and accountability only to the Pope himself. These privileges, combined with their reputation for military prowess and financial integrity, made them the preferred bankers and protectors of European nobility. The Templars pioneered what we now recognize as international banking. Pilgrims could deposit money at a Templar preceptory in Europe and withdraw equivalent funds in the Holy Land, eliminating the need to carry gold and silver across dangerous territories. This system, backed by the order's military might and papal protection, generated enormous wealth. By the 13th century, the Templars owned vast estates across Europe, commanded fleets of ships, and maintained a network of fortified castles and banking houses that stretched from Britain to the eastern Mediterranean. Archaeological evidence supports accounts of their immense wealth. Excavations at former Templar sites have revealed sophisticated treasury systems, underground vaults, and architectural features designed for storing and protecting valuable materials. The Order's Paris Temple served as the French royal treasury, and English kings regularly borrowed from Templar coffers to finance their campaigns. But the Templars' success ultimately led to their downfall. King Philip IV of France, deeply in debt to the Order and coveting their wealth, convinced Pope Clement V to authorize their arrest. The coordinated dawn raids of October 13, 1307, were executed with military precision across France. Hundreds of Templars were seized simultaneously, their properties confiscated, and their leaders subjected to torture to extract confessions of heresy and other crimes. Yet when royal officials inventoried the seized Templar properties, they discovered something extraordinary. The treasure was gone. The Paris Temple's legendary vaults stood empty. Account books showed enormous wealth, but the actual gold, silver, relics and documents had vanished without a trace. This disappearance becomes even more remarkable when we consider the scope of what was missing, not just monetary wealth, but potentially ancient artifacts, religious relics, and secret documents accumulated during 2 centuries of operation. Historical records suggest the Templars may have received advance warning of their impending arrest. Some accounts describe unusual activity at Templar strongholds in the days preceding October 13th. Witnesses reported seeing heavily loaded carts departing Templar properties under cover of darkness, and ships leaving French ports with unknown cargo. The Templar fleet, one of the most advanced naval forces of its time, had effectively disappeared from French harbours before the arrests began. This evidence has spawned numerous theories about the treasure's fate. One persistent hypothesis suggests the wealth was transported to Scotland, where King Robert the Bruce had been excommunicated and thus felt no obligation to honour papal orders against the Templars. Scottish Templar sites, particularly Rosslyn Chapel, continue to attract treasure hunters and researchers seeking evidence of hidden Templar artifacts. Portugal presents another compelling possibility. The Portuguese monarchy refused to suppress the Templars, instead reorganizing them as the Order of Christ. This continuity suggests that Portuguese Templars may have preserved not only their traditions, but also their treasure. The Order of Christ later financed Portuguese exploration, including the voyages that led to the discovery of the New World expeditions that could have been funded by ancient Templar wealth. More intriguing theories connect the Templars to the earliest European expeditions to North America. Some researchers point to the mysterious Newport Tower in Rhode Island and various stone carvings throughout New England as evidence of pre-Columbian Templar presence. Oak Island in Nova Scotia has attracted particular attention, with its complex system of underground tunnels and mysterious deposits that have defied explanation for over 2 centuries. Modern archaeological techniques have brought new tools to the search for Templar treasure. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed previously unknown chambers beneath former Templar sites. In 2017, researchers scanning beneath Herdewike House in England discovered a network of underground tunnels connecting to what may have been a Templar preceptory. Similar discoveries at sites across Europe suggest that much of the Templars' infrastructure remains hidden beneath centuries of accumulated earth and later construction. The documentary evidence presents its own mysteries. While most Templar records were destroyed or confiscated, surviving fragments hint at the Order's involvement in activities far beyond their official mandate. References to mysterious expeditions, unusual architectural projects, and connections to ancient knowledge traditions suggest the Templars may have possessed secrets beyond mere monetary wealth. Perhaps most intriguingly, the Templars' sophisticated understanding of banking, navigation, and international commerce was centuries ahead of their time. Their organizational structure, with its emphasis on secrecy, hierarchy, and international coordination, bears striking resemblances to later secret societies that emerged throughout Europe. These connections raise questions about whether the Templars' true legacy lies not in hidden gold, but in ideas and knowledge that survived their official suppression. As modern technology continues to probe beneath ancient stones and forgotten foundations, the possibility remains that somewhere in the shadows of history, the greatest treasure hunt of all time still awaits its final chapter. Somewhere in the world, hidden perhaps in a forgotten chapel, a sealed vault, or the depths of an ancient well, lies an object that has inspired more quests, claimed more lives, and generated more legends than any other artifact in human history. The Holy Grail, whether cup, bowl, or chalice, represents the ultimate treasure of Christian tradition. According to medieval legend, this vessel caught the blood of Jesus Christ during his crucifixion, transforming an ordinary piece of pottery or metalwork into the most sacred relic in Christendom. Yet despite 1,000 years of searching, from medieval knights to modern archaeologists, no definitive Holy Grail has ever been found. The earliest written accounts of the Grail appear not in religious texts, but in 12th century French Romance literature. Chrétien de Troyes introduced the concept in his unfinished poem Percival, the Story of the Grail, around 1190, describing a mysterious vessel that appears during a feast in a castle belonging to the wounded fisher king. In Chrétien's version, the Grail, spelled with a lowercase g, seems to be a serving dish rather than a drinking cup, and carries no explicit Christian symbolism. The transformation of this literary device into a sacred Christian relic occurred through subsequent medieval authors who elaborated on Chrétien's foundation. Robert de Boron's Joseph of Arimathea, written around 1200, explicitly connected the Grail to Christ's Passion, claiming that Joseph used the cup from the Last Supper to collect Christ's blood at the crucifixion. This narrative established the dual nature of the Grail's sacred power. It had touched Christ's lips during his final meal with the disciples and received his blood at the moment of his death. The Grail legend gained further complexity through the Arthurian cycle, where it became the object of the ultimate quest for the Knights of the Round Table. Only the purest knight ultimately revealed to be Galahad, son of Lancelot, could achieve the Grail and witness its miraculous powers. These stories described the Grail as a source of spiritual sustenance, capable of feeding the worthy with whatever food they most desired and granting visions of divine truth. But what was the historical reality behind these literary fantasies? Archaeological and historical evidence suggests several possible origins for the Grail tradition. Early Christian communities did preserve relics associated with Christ's life and death, and chalices used in the Eucharist held special significance as vessels that contained the symbolic blood of Christ. The conflation of these liturgical objects with relics of the Passion could have provided the foundation for later Grail legends. The search for physical Grail candidates has produced numerous contenders across Europe and beyond. The Sacro Catino in Genoa's Cathedral of San Lorenzo was long believed to be the Holy Grail, described as a green glass bowl that Crusaders brought back from the Holy Land. However, when the bowl was damaged in 1906, analysis revealed it to be medieval Islamic glasswork rather than a first-century Palestinian artifact. In Valencia, Spain, the cathedral houses what locals claim is the true Holy Grail, a first-century agate cup mounted in a later medieval setting. This chalice, known as the Santo Cáliz, has a documented history stretching back to the 3rd century and was used by popes during visits to Spain. Scientific analysis has confirmed that the cup portion dates to approximately the time of Christ, making it one of the more credible candidates from a purely archaeological perspective. The chalice of Doña Urraca in the Basilica of San Isidoro in León, Spain, presents another intriguing possibility. This ornate cup, crafted from 2 Roman-era onyx bowls and decorated with gold and precious stones, was created in the 11th century, but incorporates much older components. Recent research has suggested that one of the bowls could indeed date to the 1st century, providing a potential physical link to the time of Christ. Britain has produced its own collection of Grail claims. Glastonbury Abbey, with its connections to both Arthurian legend and early Christianity, has long been associated with Grail traditions. The Nanteos cup, a wooden bowl held by a Welsh family for centuries, was believed by some to be the Grail until scientific analysis revealed its medieval origins. More recently, the discovery of ancient wells and springs around Glastonbury has fueled speculation about hidden chambers that might conceal the true Grail. The quest for the Grail has also led researchers to examine the practices of early Christian communities. The Eucharist, central to Christian worship from its earliest days, involved the use of actual cups and chalices. Archaeological excavations of early Christian sites have uncovered numerous liturgical vessels, any of which could theoretically have been used by Christ or his immediate followers. However, the challenge lies in proving such a connection across 2 millennia. Modern scientific techniques have brought new precision to Grail research. Radiocarbon dating, chemical analysis, and microscopic examination can now determine the age, composition, and geographic origin of ancient vessels with remarkable accuracy. DNA analysis has even been applied to supposed bloodstains on claimed Grail artifacts, though results have generally proved inconclusive or revealed later contamination. The psychological appeal of the Grail quest extends beyond religious devotion into fundamental human desires for meaning, purpose, and connection to the divine. The Grail represents the ultimate synthesis of spiritual and material treasure, an object of immense sacred power that also promises worldly transformation for those pure enough to achieve it. Perhaps the greatest mystery surrounding the Holy Grail is not where it might be hidden, but whether the object itself matters as much as the search it has inspired, leaving us to wonder if the true Grail was never meant to be found, but rather to draw seekers towards something far more valuable than any cup could contain. In the autumn of 1327, within the stone walls of Berkeley Castle in Gloucestershire, one of England's most controversial kings met his end under circumstances so suspicious that historians continue to debate whether Edward II actually died there at all. Edward II's demise cannot be understood without examining the catastrophic final years of his reign. The king who ascended to the throne in 1307 had proven himself one of medieval England's least effective monarchs. His defeats in Scotland, including the devastating loss at Bannockburn in 1314, had humiliated the English nobility. His passionate relationships with male favourites, first Piers Gaveston and later Hugh Despenser the Younger, had alienated the powerful barons who expected to share in royal governance. By 1326, opposition to Edward's rule had crystallised around an unlikely alliance: his own wife, Isabella of France, and her lover, Roger Mortimer. Isabella, once known as the She-Wolf of France, had fled to the continent with their son, the future Edward III, ostensibly to negotiate with her brother, the French king. Instead, she gathered an invasion force and returned to England with Mortimer, launching a rebellion that swept Edward from power with startling speed. The deposition itself followed established medieval procedures. Parliament declared Edward unfit to rule, citing his incompetence and the evil counsel of his favourites. In January 1327, Edward formally abdicated in favour of his 14-year-old son, with Isabella and Mortimer assuming power as regents. The fallen king was imprisoned, first at Kenilworth Castle under the relatively benign custody of Henry of Lancaster, then transferred to the more remote Berkeley Castle under the control of Thomas Berkeley and John Maltravers. What happened next remains one of medieval England's most enduring mysteries. On September 21st, 1327, approximately 8 months after his deposition, Berkeley Castle's constables announced that Edward II had died during the night of natural causes. The timing was remarkably convenient for the new regime. Several plots to restore Edward to the throne had already been uncovered, and a living deposed king represented a permanent threat to his son's reign and the regency of Isabella and Mortimer. The official account of Edward's death immediately aroused suspicion. Medieval chroniclers noted unusual circumstances surrounding the announcement. The king's body was displayed for several days, allowing local nobles and clergy to view the corpse. Contemporary accounts described the body as unmarked, showing no signs of violence or disease that might explain the sudden death of a man still in his mid-40s. However, the absence of visible wounds on Edward's corpse spawned rather than suppressed rumours of foul play. Within decades of his death, a persistent legend emerged, claiming that Edward had been murdered through an extraordinarily cruel method. A red-hot iron poker inserted into his rectum, a form of execution that would leave no external marks while serving as a symbolic punishment for his alleged homosexual relationships. This gruesome story, while dramatic, lacks contemporary documentation. The earliest written account of the poker murder appears in chronicles written decades after Edward's death, suggesting it may have been a later embellishment designed to emphasize the depravity of Isabella and Mortimer's regime. Medieval chroniclers were not above inventing salacious details to enhance their narratives, particularly when describing the downfall of unpopular rulers. Modern historians have proposed alternative theories based on careful analysis of the surviving evidence. Some suggest Edward was suffocated, a method that would also leave few traces on the body. Others point to the possibility of poisoning, though medieval toxicology was primitive and detection methods non-existent. The delay between Edward's supposed death and its announcement, several days according to some accounts, could have allowed time for the body to be prepared in ways that concealed evidence of violence. Perhaps most intriguingly, some historians question whether Edward died at Berkeley Castle at all. In 1338, 11 years after the supposed death, a letter written by Manuele Fieschi, a papal notary, reached King Edward III. The Fieschi letter claimed that Edward II had not died but had escaped from Berkeley Castle with the help of a sympathetic servant. According to this account, the king had fled to the continent and eventually became a hermit in Italy, living out his days in religious seclusion. The Fieschi letter provides specific details about Edward's alleged escape route and subsequent travels, including time spent in various European monasteries. While the letter could be dismissed as fantasy or fraud, its author was a respected papal official with no obvious motive for deception. Moreover, the letter was addressed to Edward III himself, suggesting it was intended as serious intelligence rather than idle gossip. Archaeological evidence has added little clarity to the mystery. Edward's tomb in Gloucester Cathedral has never been opened for scientific examination, and Berkeley Castle has undergone too many modifications over the centuries to preserve clear evidence from 1327. Without physical remains to examine, historians must rely on documentary evidence that often reflects the political biases of its authors. The political context of Edward's death or disappearance reveals complex motivations for both murder and concealment. Isabella and Mortimer needed Edward dead to secure their position, but they also needed to avoid appearing as regicides. A natural death at Berkeley Castle served their interests perfectly, whether or not it actually occurred. Meanwhile, if Edward had indeed escaped, keeping his survival secret would have protected both the escaped king and those who helped him. As the centuries have passed, Edward II's fate has become emblematic of how political necessity, historical bias, and the passage of time can obscure even the most fundamental facts about the past, leaving us to wonder whether the truth about that September night in 1327 died with its participants, or still waits to be discovered in some forgotten archive or unmarked grave.